Okay, well then, hold on. Let me get a drink. Oh, look at my mug.
Hey,
I
that's
got I
nice. I
got
like
I
that.
got I got this at the show.
That's fucking sick, dude. I've really come around to the 72 seasons design and kind
Yeah.
of vibe to it. Because like initially I was like, I didn't know what to make of it. I was like, do I like it or do I not? And now I'm very much on board.
Also got these koozies.
Wow.
Anyway, yeah,
Suck up.
I like yellow and black, which is funny
Yeah.
because I don't like Striper at all. But I mean, I do like yellow and black. But anyway,
I do like bees. Bees are cool.
yeah, B's and D's nuts.
Nuts.
So
Hey.
hello, everyone. On that note, we're start. This is Cranked and Ranked. Welcome to Cranked and Ranked, the show where we rank band discographies and shit. And we're doing another one today. And if you're in the podcast world, welcome. In the video world, that was me. I was silently waving.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, we're back with another. It's a fairly short discography, but a very impactful one, and I'm very excited to talk about this. We're going to be ranking the studio albums plus one compilation of Black Flag, and
Yeah.
we're doing the compilation just because they didn't release any actual albums, quote unquote, prior to Rollins being the vocalist. And so I felt like that should be represented. So
Absolutely.
we did a compilation that they put out. But we'll get to that. But welcome, everybody. As usual, old head with me as always, Eddie Sparxx.
Yo.
Yeah. So I feel like we got some momentum back here because we had we had a break and now we're doing some shows, and it is funny that last week we did a show that I thought was one of the funnest ones we did, and it's got such low numbers, and I was like, that's just how it works because it's like. But I want to remind, if you're listening to this today, go back and listen to the or watch the Encino Man / Airhead special because it's fun. It's whether you give a shit about those two movies or not, it was a blast doing that episode. But I have a feeling this one's going to be a blast as well. Talking about
Absolutely.
Black Flag. So I you know what? I haven't even thought about this because normally when we begin these rankings, we talk about where the band first entered our lives. And I think for me, it was in the early 90s. I seem to remember I had a really good friend whose dad was a pastor in a church. Cool. And they went on some kind of retreat and invited me to come with them. And it wasn't like a retreat to go do, praying and stuff. It was actually a retreat where we went and did
I don't know why I said cool like that.
We went and did stuff for this organization called Habitat for Humanity. Do you know what that is? Do they have that over there as well?
I've heard of it, yeah.
Yeah, so we actually worked on fixing up somebody's house with Habitat for Humanity. But I was in my early teens. I think this may have been 93, 92. Anyway, but I remember that we went to, I don't remember, I think we went to San Antonio, but then one of our off days are like, oh, we're going to go on a trip just right across the border to Mexico and just look at the border town stuff and hang out for the day. The long story short, on the way there, the bus driver was playing the album Damaged as we were going. And I was so just like, this is a church retreat. This is some this is some aggressive stuff. And the guy was like, yeah, this is Black Flag. And I was like, Black Flag? I was just like, you know, I didn't know who they were, but I was just like, oh, fuck yeah. And I really liked it. And then it really got to the point where around that same time I was introduced to the Rollins band. And once I was able to make that connection of like, oh, Henry Rollins was in Black Flag, then, you know, everything kind of clicked. And I've been a fan of Henry Rollins in the grand scope of things, not just musically, but the man, since I was a teenager. So it ended up bringing me back to getting into all Black Flag. And so that was, you know, I wasn't like, you know, there back in the day because I was, you know, barely a child when they were putting out their original albums. But I eventually got around to it. And then, so what about you? Prior to this, had you heard entire Black Flag albums before?
The first Black Flag song I ever heard was My War. And that's
a good one.
That's on the soundtrack to GTA 5. And it's on there's a, you know how in San Andreas, which we covered, we did an episode where we ranked all of the radio stations. You know, there's a station in that called Radio X. Well, the that one's set in 1992. GTA 5, the most recent entry, which turns 10 years old this month in about a week, which is fucking insane. Wow, Release 6 already, for God's sake. But yeah, anyway, there's a Radio X in this separate universe is called Channel X, and it plays hardcore punk from the late 70s and 80s.
All right.
It's got stuff like Early Suicidal Tendencies on it, you know, TSOL, all the Adolescence, all of that stuff, the Germs, all of that stuff's on there.
Nice.
And My War was the Black Flag song on there, and I was struck by it because I was like, this is like thrash, but not produced at all. And I was like, this is cool. This is something I haven't been exposed to yet. And I was like, you know, this punk thing might have something to it. You know, I knew a lot of metal at that point. I wasn't really a punk guy.
Yeah.
But as soon as I heard My War, I was like, oh, I'm going to check some of this stuff out. But it took me a long time to get around to it because around then, for some reason, I just got like blindsided by the Misfits and I just deep dived into them.
Oh, I think a lot of, when you're young, that happens. I think that the Misfits just sabotage everything punk. They did for me too at first.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But yeah, so after that, years passed. And then eventually I came across the album My War and I listened to it all the way through. And then when it gets to like the really heavy, slow songs at the end, I was like, this sounds like grunge before grunge. And then that just opened a whole other thing. I was like, well, I like thrash, I like grunge, and this clearly influenced both. So then, you know, years down the line, we're now doing this episode where I finally deep dived and listened to all the albums.
Nice.
And discovered that I genuinely don't know if there's a right or wrong ranking here, barring maybe like one or two releases. I mean, there never is, but
this is one where I feel like there's so many different angles that you could come at this with, depending on musically, not your experience with music, but just, you know, what you like and what you enjoy. So
this is definitely a ranking of preference as opposed to quality, in my opinion. Like,
yeah, there's a little bit that's going to be about quality, but you're correct. I really do. I feel like anybody else's ranking, for the most part, I'd be like, it's hard to argue with that because it's it's such an odd discography too, and we'll get into it because there are a lot of things about the albums that I've always had questions about, and I always feel like they would be the kind of questions that I wouldn't actually get real answers about. We'll get into that, but it's definitely, and it's interesting to think, you know, how much. I think that's why people are still drawn to 70s, 80s, 90s music.
Yeah.
Because those were all decades where it wasn't like there was one dominating thing that sort of came up and then that's the music of a certain decade. If you dig into it, especially in the 80s, there's so many things that are all like coming out of the 70s, where 70s were already influential on all these different things, but then not only do you have some rock bands, that influence punk bands, but then the punk bands influence bands that would become the hardcore bands. The hardcore bands would end up influencing metal bands at some point, but then you'd have hardcore bands that splintered off into post-hardcore that would end up, it's like, and then you have thrash metal, then you have black metal, then you have like all of these different things that in the 80s, it's like the tree just went from having, a dozen branches to 1,000 branches. And then we never looked back. And so and Black Flag is one of those bands that I feel like what they did at the time was equal parts inspiring to people and pissing people off. That I think that they touched so many musicians that we look up to as like, these people are fucking geniuses. So many of them will point back and go, well, Black Flag is one of the bands where it started from. So that's just fascinating to me. Just that is all that.
That is true, because I've always thought, through the 70s, but by the end of the 70s, you pretty much end up with rock, punk, and metal. And in the 80s, it just goes, okay, well, there's like 20 different versions of each of these now. Yeah. And then by the 90s, there's like 5 or 6 versions of those, each 21s. And now it's just crazy. Now it's got to the point now where like labels are kind of arbitrary. Because like,
there are a lot of bands that I hear people go, oh yeah, this is a great thrash band, and I'll listen to it and I go, this doesn't really sound like thrash, but I guess if you take this one element of it, then they're a thrash band. But that's because like
progressive piss grind, it's like
once
you've got more than 3 words in your genre, it's time to just fucking call it one thing.
Or I mean, at this point, music is so easily accessible to find stuff. We shouldn't even be fucking with genres anymore. It should literally be, I'm into this band, they're called Fuck Your Yankee Blue Jeans, and somebody's like, well, what do they sound like? And the answer to that should be Google. like just like, you go listen to them. It should be, a band representing themselves with a sound. Obviously, there are still plenty of bands that are honed in on one particular thing. Some of them I love, some of them I don't. But anyway, Black Flag were not that band. No. Like, listening to their shit in order, you just hear, I don't even know. I don't know what the plan was. I don't think it went to plan. And I think whatever plan they had changed multiple times as the band was going on. But
I think it was very much a mindset of subvert everything possible. It was like, hey, these are the punk conventions right now. We're gonna go the other way. It's cool. It's cool to have your hair buzzed short. Okay, well, we're gonna grow ours out. Just to piss you off, and that's fun. I like that attitude.
I absolutely agree. There's there'll be plenty of me talking about the progression of a band.
Core.
A band giving you different shit, which I love. So let's just get started. So we have 8 total albums to rank, where 7 of them are actual albums, and then the one that we chose to represent the early days of Black Flag was the first 4 years.
Yes.
Which, if you really want to dig into it, their discography is a little confusing, the same way like the Misfits and other bands are as well. Where if you really want to because the first 4 years is supposed to be everything that they released prior to Rollins. But if you go listen to Everything Went Black, there are songs that aren't on the first 4 years, but that's because that was released after Rollins was in the band. But anyway, so we chose the first 4 years to represent, if we were going in order, these are the things they released. And we just didn't bother with the Everything Went Black part of it. But and of course, leaving out EPs and little things like that. But so 8 things total. So this is definitely going to be interesting. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say we have the same number 8. But I'm going to let you lead it off. This is probably everyone around the world. This is number 8.
Yeah, this is a pretty unanimous decision, isn't this? So my number 8. No surprise. Damaged. No, I'm fucking with you. No, it's What The.
What The? From 2013. Their 7th album. That's also my number 8. That was made almost 30 years after their last album.
Yeah.
But let's get the Eddie Sparxx take on this appropriately titled album.
Okay. I'm not going to lie here. Generally speaking, I'll do a track by track, but I won't camp out here. Yeah, it's like I won't camp out here too long, but I'll give you my thoughts, and they are as follows. The artwork looks like South Park fan art drawn by a toddler. The 22 tracks that make up this album, 22. I just feel indifferent to, it's one of those albums I would never really reach for again, but also can't really pick out anything in particular that offended me, which in a way, if I'm going to a Black Flag album, I want to feel like they're trying to piss me off a little bit, even if they don't.
They piss me off. I'll get into it.
Well, here's the thing. It's like, if I have anything to say about a song here, I would say pretty much the same for every song.
There's a reason for that.
Yeah. Because it's pretty much just, start with a bass riff, go into a 1 to 2 minute punk song, and do that 22 times.
Yeah.
And there's not really anything of note. It's just, that's the thing about Black Flag, is that the, violent twists and turns and what's coming next, there's not really any of that here, because it's just 22 tracks of exactly what you expect, one after another. It's just kind of, it is disappointing. Like, what's the lineup on this album? I mean, obviously it's not Henry Rollins.
No, it's Ron Reyes on vocals, which Ron Reyes was the second Black Flag vocalist back in the day, I believe. He was one of the early vocalists, so he's back. Obviously you have Greg Ginn, but Greg Ginn is playing guitar and bass. And then I don't know the drummer. It's a drummer that I hadn't heard of prior to this. He might be somebody that's known in the punk community or something, but I didn't know him previously.
Gregory Moore.
Yeah. And you know what? They fucked him over with this, because the drum sound is atrocious. The whole sound of it is atrocious. But and that's comparing it to albums that sound pretty bad. Some of them. So, but the thing you're saying about, like, you would say the same thing for every song. The thing that blows me away about this album is the majority of it sounds like a punk rock DJ mix.
Yeah.
Where every song could just lead right into the next song. And I swear to God, like, I get confused on where I am in this album, but also it sounds like they literally just got together in a room one day, started jamming, playing similar things all in a row for 45 minutes. They recorded all of it. Then they just separated it into different tracks and said, Ron, write different vocals over each one of these things. So it's like, if you could easily just put everything together as one song, barring maybe 1 or 2 tracks. The last track, I think, is actually different. But it really does sound like it was just edited from the same jam session because even though he's playing different notes, all the songs are like the same. He's like, he didn't even fucking try. This is the perfect example of, I don't know what happened, but they literally took what could have been cool. It could have been a cool thing. I'm fine with this lineup of the band. Ron Reyes, Greg Ginn, the drummer, whatever. Put out an album. But it really feels like on the day they all just went, oh, can't be bothered. And so they just threw this piece of shit out there. And then like same thing with the artwork. Like, because Ron Reyes is the one who did the artwork, and it's almost like they just went, yeah, they need some artwork. What do you got? I have this weird thing that I just fucked around with last night while I was drunk. Yeah, throw that on there. That looks fine. And what it boils down to is like, I almost feel like with the name of the album, the cover of the album, the way that everything's laid out on the album, it's literally like if you just polled 50 kids at Hot Topic and said, hey, you know that Black Flag logo on your shirt, right? They're an actual band. What do you think their album would be like? And they just put together this album of like, this is punk-ish. And we don't want to try too hard because punk is not trying hard. And but it's almost like the mastermind behind the whole thing, Greg Ginn, completely lost sight of what the fuck made Black Flag so cool.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely got a vibe of
appropriate. It's an appropriate title. I will give you that. But I mean, I think it wouldn't piss me off so much if there weren't elements that made me feel like this could have been good. Because sometimes the little riffs and melodies, the odd Greg Ginness of it all, sometimes I'll hear something and go, oh man, this could have been such a fucking good song. And then it just goes into the same old bullshit. And lyrically speaking, I'm just like, it's fine. It's whatever. That doesn't matter. I'm not really going to blame Ron for it because I feel like he probably did his best with what he was given. But I just feel like
it's 22 tracks of wasted potential.
Yeah, it's like something that could have been enjoyable presented with minimal effort. And it ends up being 43 minutes of a torturous punk rock jerk off that where you never come. It's like the album just ends and you get no pleasure whatsoever out of it, and you got to go to bed.
Jerked off for 50 straight minutes, no lube, and you don't even nut.
Yeah, it's barely even songs. It's just one of those things where, and that's part of my thing. Because I really feel like if I could sit down and talk to Greg Ginn about it, I don't think he would be honest. I don't think I could have an honest discussion with Greg Ginn about what the fuck happened with this. Because knowing what I know about him, I don't think that would happen. I don't think we're ever going to actually honestly know what the deal was. And fine, it's a piece of genius. You're right.
The joke's on us, man.
The joke is on us. Anyway, anything else to say about that one? Because I'm done with that shit.
It's an ironic masterpiece that got us to say the album title a fuckload of times.
Yeah.
By being the worst Black Flag album. Anyway.
All right. Well, now we got that out of the way. Let's get into just a big, huge chunk of classic shit.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So, now I'm thinking, I'm trying to think to myself, are we going to have the same number 7?
Because could be. My number 7 will annoy some people out there, but
okay. I'm not sure if mine will. So my number 7 is Family Man.
No, that is not my number 7.
Okay, cool. I have a pretty simple reason for Family Man being number 7, and it's that it's a half spoken word, half instrumental album. You know, I like my punk in the form of songs, and this is like a deconstructed Black Flag. It's cool. Yes. It is cool. And I think it's really cool that they were like, oh, is this the first one that came out after Damage? No, My War came out and then it's Family Man, was it?
Yeah, My War, Family Man, and then Slip It In. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
All in the same year, all in 1984.
Insane. So like I say, this is like side one is spoken word Henry Rollins.
Family
man. Family man. What's the one where he says he cut off his left arm?
The good one. Yeah. Man, I love Rollins so much, but I especially love young, angry, confused Rollins.
Yeah.
Because like one of the best books in the world to read if you get a chance is called Get in the Van, and it's literally just put together all of Rollins' journals from the tours with Black Flag, which were fucking hell on everybody in the band. But just being inside the mind of this early 20s kid who's like figuring it all out as we're reading it, and I'm just like, it's so fucking fascinating. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah.
I highly recommend it if anyone hasn't read it. It's you can also get it on audio with Rollins reading it himself, so that's pretty cool too.
That is cool because, like, even though this is my number 7, none of this sounds phoned in. Like, he means it.
Oh no, he is.
They fucking mean what they're doing, and I got mad respect for that. Just so happens that the albums that pushed it to this place, I just prefer to listen to. But I do think it is a bold thing as a punk band to turn around and say, hey, look, the first half of this is spoken word.
Yeah.
And the second half has barely any vocals. So you get half and half. Fuck you.
Well,
that's why
on the vinyl, it's all spoken word and then one song with vocals, but then the whole side B is just instrumentals. And and them being very weird with the instrumentals.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But this is the beginning of my favorite lineup of Black Flag, because it's the first one that has Kira on bass with Bill Stevenson on drums, and then of course Greg and Rollins. But
I was going to say I'm not very clued up on the lineups.
So that lineup played on Family Man, Slip It In, all the rest of the albums from Family Man on had that lineup. And Bill Stevenson, if you don't know, is the drummer / one of the songwriters for Descendants. And
right. Yeah.
So, and it's an interesting, I'll get to that later, but there's an interesting, another thing where I have questions for Black Flag / Descendants. But just this collection of musicians, I just love what they brought, especially if you watch live footage of this version of the band. They were fucking on fire. And so, yeah. Anyway, but this is where it all began with, technically that one song is the only song that they're all on this album, but there you go.
Yeah. And it's, again, like I say, it's cool. It just so happened to get pushed down by everything else.
Yes.
Yeah. It's presented in a way that I would prefer to listen to. So that is my number 7, Family Man. Family Man.
Like I said, this is going to annoy some people because ever since I first got into Black Flag way back in the day, or way back in my day, there have been the camp of people that I usually run into that claim that this is the only real good Black Flag. And I don't agree. But, to each their own. My number 7 is The First 4 Years from 1983, which is a collection of all of the stuff that they released, 7 inches and comp tracks, I believe, from before Rollins joined the band. So you got Keith Morris, who went on to be in the Circle Jerks, singing for a few songs, Ron Reyes for a few songs, and then Des Cadena, who also on Damaged would play rhythm guitar. But so 3 different vocalists. And I think there's one song that Chuck Dukowski does vocals on too, who was the bass player at the time. And I like this. It's fun. It is enjoyable every time I've listened to it. But I think because my introduction to Black Flag was Damaged, and I'm a Rollins fan, I like the experimental and sort of pushing boundaries and subverting, as you said, everything version of Black Flag. But with First 4 Years, especially this stuff with Keith Morris on vocals, it just sounds way too much like cookie cutter punk music.
Yeah.
Now, to be fair, that was in the late 70s. It was in the late 70s. So, you know, I can't really say much about it, but I'm just talking about as personally when I come to it, I go, well, there are some classic tracks here. And, you know, some tracks would later be on Damaged, done by other vocalists. And I'm like, yeah, but some of the energy just isn't there for me. And because I wasn't there at the time, I didn't hear this stuff when it came out. I have a feeling if you hear it when it came out, like I'm pretty sure Henry Rollins himself would be like, no, that's the good Black Flag. Because he was a big fan of them because of these things that they were putting out. So I'm not discounting them in any way. I just think when put up to everything else they put out, when it comes to putting an effort to do something original and different and make a stamp and say fuck you to the status quo of punk rock, First 4 Years is more living in the status quo of punk rock and what would become hardcore. But so it is fun to hear the evolution of the band because it's all in chronological order, so you clearly hear them building to more hardcore kind of sound.
And it's only about 25 minutes long, isn't it? It's not very long.
Yeah, it's not long. And for the most part, you got Robo on drums, which Robo was a drummer in the Misfits for a lot of that classic Misfits stuff. And I really do feel like when you listen to this in context with everything they did, this feels so much like they're workshopping what Black Flag actually is. And then they eventually get to what Black Flag actually is close to the end of the album. And which I prefer that. The stuff with Des Cadena on vocals out of all this stuff is the stuff that I like the most. I think probably because he has the harshest delivery. And then, of course, you get to Rollins, whose delivery is just pretty much harsh from the get-go. But yeah, it's great. It's just it is not go-to Black Flag for me, and I realize that goes against a lot of people because this is the go-to Black Flag for them, but not me. I want my Black Flag with Rollins and with Greg Ginn playing notes that don't actually go with the song. That's what I like. So that's my number 7.
Cool. I'm going to bounce right off of that because my number 6 is the First 4 Years.
Nice.
And yeah, I like how this turned out. So Nervous Breakdown is a punk classic. Fix Me. It always makes me smile when punk songs are less than a minute long, you know?
Yeah.
You know, just get in, do their job and get out, you know? I've had it. Attitude is dripping off of this one, complete with snarky laughing. Wasted is another shorty, you know, the last we hear Keith Morris on. Jealous Again. Yeah, I love that these EPs are all like 5 minutes each, but they pack so much energy because this is a compilation made of like 4 or 5 EPs.
Yeah.
You know, Revenge. I mean, this stuff must have been incredible to see live at the time, you know.
Oh, hell yeah. I bet.
Revolutionary, you know, it's music that, you know, is so purposefully brash and unpolished that it was just kind of it was a massive game changer at the time. White Minority, you know, Ron Reyes is the guy on this EP, like this section.
And on What the?
Yeah. What the? No Values has great riffing. You Bet We've Got Something Personal Against You. Incredible fucking song title. Let's just say that now. Clocked In, love the frantic bendy bits. Six Pack, love me some bass. I've heard it before, is dissonance personified. American Waste has a great shouty chorus. Machine. How anyone can have vocals like that and be able to talk like that after
Yeah.
I listen to some of these punk vocalists and it's like, dude, how physically how are you not bleeding in your throat right now? I mean, they probably were, to be fair. But yeah, Louie is a Black Flagged cover of Louie. And Damaged One, clocking in at over 4 minutes. This track may as well be a Dream Theater song. Yeah. Whenever I see a Black Flag song that exceeds the 4 to 5 minute mark, I'm like, wow, okay, we're in for some sludgy and or weird stuff.
Yeah, agreed. All right, over to me for my number. My number 6. These two, my number 6 and my number 5. I really had to like think about it because they're very close together for me. But I ended up with number 6 as In My Head from 1985. One of 2 albums they put out in 1985. Also, it's important to note that sure, they put out 3 albums in 84, 2 albums in 85, but I think they also put out live albums each year as well. Yeah. So there's a lot going on. But In My Head is their 6th album. And it's the final album of what I consider the classic lineup. And it apparently was intended to be a Greg Ginn solo album at first. And I guess I hear a little bit of that in this. Because
there is a bit of a departure stylistically, isn't there? Like it gets
out of the 2 85 albums, this is definitely the more experimental one. And honestly, and I don't know which version of this you listen to, but mine is about the original 9-track version. There's a version out now where they took the EP they would put out after this and they put it in the middle of the album. Yeah, they put it in the middle of the album. So, but I'm not talking about that. So, but I would say that, when you're dealing with In My Head and Loose Nut, In My Head, I guess I would consider it more interesting than Loose Nut, but just not as enjoyable. And it's almost like those 2 albums are like the yin and yang of each other. And at the end of the day, I will find myself wanting to listen to In My Head less than Loose Nut. But there's so much on In My Head that I'm just like, this is fucking cool as hell. But that leads me to a question that I would ask Greg Ginn that he would never, ever honestly answer me. Because coming as a person that, I know how to play guitar, I know how to write songs, I've been doing it for 30 years. Whether or not anyone thinks what I do is any good is a different story. I'm not trying to say I'm good at what I do. I'm just saying I've done it. But some of the stuff that Greg Ginn does, because if you listen, his guitar playing is loaded with fuck-ups. He always fucks up. And I know that maybe that was intentional, or maybe they were just rushed to get things recorded, and that was the whole point. But then there's sometimes where his stuff he's doing kind of odd notes and things that don't seem to, like they're being played wrong. And I think a lot of people are too quick to jump on that and go, oh, he's incorporating jazz.
Yeah.
I am a really big fan of Black Flag, but I'm all like, are you sure?
I knew you were going to bring this up because I was listening to this album. I heard what people were saying. Like, it's that whole thing of, we'll play something that sounds off and say it's jazz,
Yeah.
But
so
people have
I
arbitrarily given it that label.
I feel like I want to know how much of it is he is just not very good at doing this. So, and his ineptitude is what led to his style. And because I like it,
Mm.
But at this point, it's been done. So if I hear other bands coming out and they're just doing this like bang, burn, ding, 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 I'm going to go, get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck
Yeah.
out. Because Greg Ginn already did it. Now,
Yeah.
whether or not he was the first person to do it, that's a different story altogether. But he was the first person that I heard do that kind of shit, where I go, there's very little talent in there when it comes to the actual performing of the music. So I've always listened to it and I've gone, was it intentional? Did he just not care and he was just throwing notes on top of it? You know, was this shit written out and planned that way? Or was he just like, I'm just going to play whatever when we record it and that's going to be the song? Because that's interesting as well. I feel like at the end of the day, it's probably a little bit of all of that put together, you know?
I definitely think if there is a music genre where you can fail upwards, it's going to be a punk offshoot of some kind.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
if you can turn around and say, oh yeah, my influences are punk, people will kind of give you a pass.
Yeah.
If you're a sloppy player, because you'll be like, oh, you're playing into the punk thing that people, like something to be a little sloppy or things. And there is a beauty to that in that it feels quintessentially human, that this music could only be performed this fuck upwardly by a human,
Yeah.
Because
try to get your AI to program an actual punk sounding song like this. There's no fucking way. It's going to be too perfect.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose if you fed it like years worth of Black Flag bootlegs, it may be able to piece together some cheap imitation that's borderline convincing, but even then.
But it is one of those things where, and I need to actually go back and read Get in the Van again, because it's been like 20 years since I read it. But I wonder, I'm thinking, did Rollins actually address this in the book about the recording techniques? Because was it the kind of thing where Greg Ginn was obsessive about, we're getting this shit on tape as quickly as possible so the moment is there? Because that would make a lot more sense. It'd be like, it doesn't matter, that fuck up wasn't bad enough. We're moving on. Which that's kind of an interesting way to do things. But as it got further along and shit was produced better, that's when my questions start coming up. So Loose Nut and In My Head, that's when the questions of like, what the, it's like
the production on those is pretty good comparatively to something like Damaged.
Yeah, so I've always, it's always been just one of those curiosities that I'm like, well, I would love to be able to pick Greg Ginn's brain and actually get the answers, but at the same time, maybe I don't. Like maybe this sort of muddled view of how everything works is what makes it really cool. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. I really enjoy this, whatever put these people together to make this music, because it's just so just like, I like it. Like you nailed it with that subversive word, because I just feel like that's what I enjoy so much about Rollins era Black Flag, is they start off with this fucking absolute classic, like hardcore album. And then little by little, every single thing is just them going, you like that, huh? Fuck you.
Yeah, literally.
And I love that. I love that kind of shit. Anyway.
Yeah.
So
you like what we made? Dumbass.
Yeah. Poser.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just, In My Head is great, but I had to like decide, am I going to put an album I enjoy above an album that's more interesting? And that's what I ended up doing. So In My Head ends up being number 6. So that leads us to your number 5.
Okay, so now this is hot take territory now.
Okay.
But like I said at the start, this is very much a case of this is where my ranking really enters the realm of preference over quality.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I feel like everything onward could switch depending on my mood. But this week, the way I was feeling the albums, I've gone for Damaged at number 5.
Dang. Okay.
And
Right.
I know, I know, I know. That's a controversial thing to say,
Yeah.
but it's the first full length LP.
Mm-hmm.
It is the first release to feature Henry Rollins, and it is a hardcore punk classic
Oh yeah.
with countless classic songs on here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I just like where they evolved to
Sure.
a little more. So like I like to hear that progression a little bit. And this is a very, very raw album. Like so much so that whenever the bass is just playing on its own, you can hear the vibration of the snare wires in the snare drum, which is,
Yeah.
clearly they recorded that in a room just playing as they would live,
Yeah.
which I fucking adore and respect. Like for as
Sure.
much as I love, for as much as I love the most polished of metal albums, this kind of music demands a certain um intimacy, that
I agree.
playing as a band in a room brings. Rise Above, classic. Need I say more, really? But like Spray Paint is a short but sweet one. And when I say short but sweet, I mean it's like less than 40 seconds long.
Yeah.
uh Six Pack is another classic. What I See, again, like I said, I love that you can hear the snare wires vibrating from the bass. It's just so real.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
people turn around and say, if someone turned around and said punk is the most real genre, I'd be like, yeah, I can't deny that, because like if you're in a room as a band, that's what it sounds like.
I mean, but
um
you have to remember too, like, it has to do with time, with technology and the time period too, because
yeah,
if punk had come about when we had Garage Band, this wouldn't, they fucking removed the shit that wasn't supposed to be there. So it's almost like
yeah,
punk had to exist late 70s, early 80s when it was being put together. So you would have these raw albums because that's how they had to do them.
yeah.
So that's, it's just one of those things where I feel like, musically speaking, if there's a divine creator that's mapping everything out, I'm like, well, he fucking did it right there,
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's immediately followed up with TV Party, which is another classic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Thirsty and Miserable. That song title reminds me of doing the Duke of Edinburgh hikes I did in high school. Police Story. 130. What? Nah. 1 minute 33 of punk goodness is Police Story.
Mm-hmm.
I meant to type gimme, 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 but it's put gimme gummies. Oh, what a correct! Aren't you wonderful?
Man, Greg Ginn just sell the song to a gummy company, like the Lifesaver
Yeah,
gummies, and then they can have an ad
yeah.
where they go, "Give me gummies."
Hey,
Those are good. Lifesaver gummies, delicious.
I was gonna say a punk band's gonna love selling their song to a commercial.
At this point, there's Black Flag shirts at every Hot Topic in America. So
You've got a point.
I think they're fine.
Yeah. Depression, great stuff. The
Yeah.
song, not the mental illness. Room 13, some cool bendy bits in this. Damage 2, the cheeky bastards put 2 first instead of Damage 1, because they're Black Flag and they do whatever the hell they want. No
Yeah.
More, got bass in it.
Chuck Dukowski on bass.
Yeah. Padded Cell is where I belong, frankly. Life of Pain, tell me about it. And Damaged One closes out the record. And honestly, it's a fucking great hardcore punk album.
Yeah.
It just so happens that I personally like where Black Flag went later on more than Black Flag stripped back and just doing hardcore punk.
Yeah, and to be fair, the albums that would follow would be more as a more like a band with Rollins, because Rollins was brought on board after that album was already recorded and he put the vocals on top of it. So
Yeah.
it's not like he had any part to do with the songwriting in any way or lyric writing. Although I think the version of Damaged One is him just talking. I don't know if that's the song. One of the songs is like him pretty much just riffing, I think. But anyway,
Yeah.
yeah. I love that album. That's not my number five. I already talked about what my number five is because I put it so close with In My Head and then Loose Nut. So, you ready for mine?
Yeah, I'm ready for yours.
Number five is Loose Nut for me from 1985. The second of the two albums from 1985. So, I mean, with these two albums, the production got better from what they were doing in '84, and there's still a progression in the music that they're doing because. The big thing for me that you notice with Loose Nut is that Rollins all of a sudden is quote unquote singing. There's a melodic quality to what he's doing. You could call it singing, but he does more of that over the songs and less yelling. And honestly, Loose Nut overall for me, feels more like a rock album than a punk album. Like, sure, it's still odd, and if you wanted to use the word punk to mean something other than a sound and more like an aesthetic or a mindset, then it's punk. But it just feels rock and then sometimes a little metalish. Like my favorite song on the album is "Annihilate This Week," which has a little bit of a metalish quality. I also love "I'm the One." "I'm the One's" a fucking great song. But I think this one I enjoy it because it actually has songwriting from all four band members. So there's also obviously Greg Ginn's all over it, but a few of the songs have writing credit from Rollins. I think one of the songs Kira helped write, and then the last song Bill Stevenson wrote. So I like the fact that it feels like a collective of the band, especially because that's my favorite version of Black Flag. But yeah, really the only thing with this one is that I feel like it feels a little bit restrained. And I like the few albums prior more because there's way more of we could go off the rails at any time. Whereas this feels like it's a more focused and mapped out while still trying to be a little bit off kilter at times or whatever. But also with some straightforward fucking rock tunes. I really enjoy it, but I enjoy the other four for what they bring a lot more. So that leads us to number four. Your number four.
Cool. So that brings me to number four with In My Head.
Yeah.
So like you said, In My Head is kind of the peak of the weird. Like they definitely put out their most strange stuff, I think, on this one. It's the last LP of like the original run, and they get pretty out there. Paralyzed is a fun, heavy opener. Something that immediately struck me with the Crazy Girl is that there's like a progressive edge to some of this stuff, which sounds weird for a punk band, but they've definitely got their prog on, and that kind of shocked me about this album.
I'm glad that you brought that up because here's another Black Flag mystery that I don't quite know the answer to. So if you listen to Black Flag starting with probably maybe not My War, but definitely Family Man through In My Head, and then you listen to The Descendants starting at about I Don't Want to Grow Up all the way through the album All, which I think is 3 or 4 albums. There are similar sounding songs where it's that weird progressive thing where it has odd time signatures and odd guitar parts that kind of don't seem like they seem weird. Yeah. And Descendants were doing that, in my opinion, way better. But it was still Bill Stevenson. Bill Stevenson has always been there in the Descendants. So my question has always been, was Bill Stevenson an influence on Greg Ginn's songwriting, or was it vice versa? Because there are so many little things where I could take a moment from a Black Flag song and play you a moment from a Descendants song, one of the weirder ones, and go, You see, it's like very similar. I just think the execution, when it comes to like music feeling like it's played by people that are all on the same page, the Descendants were better at that. Are better than that. They aren't that. They're still around today. But yeah, so and they were around kind of at the same time, but really it was like Descendants kind of went on hiatus because Milo went to college. And then Bill Stevenson was in Black Flag, and then towards the end of the Black Flag run is when Descendants got back together and did their next 3 albums, I believe. Yeah, it was when I Want to Grow Up, Enjoy, and All were those last 3. So, but yeah, it's always been interesting to me to hear that, and they're the only 2 bands from that time period that sounded like that. Those particular odd progressive qualities. And so I've always just wanted to know, like, how did the overlap happen? Because I love it. I love that shit. So, anyway.
Yeah. Like, that carried on with Black Love as well, because, you know, they really upped the weird borderline progressive thing on this album.
Yeah.
White Hot is a big old viber. In My Head is this, like, kind of chugging track. Out of This World, Henry absolutely goes off on this.
Mm-hmm.
Now I listened to the version that has 12 tracks as opposed to 9. So you know, I have some of the songs from I Can See You. So I can see you, you can see me, I can see you, you can see me. Also, can we talk about like the I want to quickly just mention the artwork to I Can See You. For some reason, I just find it like there's just something weirdly abstractly threatening about it, like that I just kind of love. I can't, like, as far as Black Flag album artwork, like, it's not one that should stand out, but it's the fact that it's clearly a sniper, like a really abstractly drawn sniper aiming a gun at you, and it's I've always been struck by that image, like. I always feel kind of scared when I look at it because I'm like, is that what it's like?
Yeah.
Put it down, man.
Yeah. That's another thing that makes those albums when you're starting with, you know, well, I guess earlier because that the artist Raymond Pettibon, the guy that did a lot of the artwork, he really did do some confrontational artwork. And I think that's part of the package that makes a lot of that Black Flag stuff so cool.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that whole aesthetic to it though. It's it's like I get this vibe from a lot of Black Flag album art, to be fair. I'm like, I'm scared, but not in a metal way. I'm kind of like, ooh.
Yeah.
Like, am I gonna get the shit kicked out of me? I don't fucking know.
it's unsettling. It's unsettling instead of creepy or like a horror movie. It's more like a psychological thriller than a horror movie.
Yeah, that's how I'd put it. Like I find the like, you know, abstract sniper more scary to look at than the you know, Cannibal Corpse album covers, because I'm like, that's gore to a cartoonish extent. That looks like a fucking courtroom sketch. You know, is this what you saw before the bullet ripped through your arm? It's like, so yeah, it's a really cool album. Where was I at?
You were in the I Can See You section.
I Can See You, you can see me. Drinking and Driving is a great song. I love that, you know, drink, don't think, drive, kill. You know, that's borderline thrash at that point. Retired at 21. Anger is dripping off this album. Society's Tease. It got really heavy, didn't they? Like, it's All Up to You is a cool song. You Let Me Down is one last discordant track. Like I say, I heard the 12-track version, not the not the 9. So yeah, this album's sick. Like, it just so happened to land at number 4 for me.
Yeah, so, it's cool that we did mention I Can See You, just because it's, you know, it was the last thing they put out as that version of the band, and then
Yeah.
And then in mine, because my number 4 is Family Man from 1984.
Okay.
And it I can also mention, which it came out the next year, I believe, but the EP, which was called Process of Weeding Out, which is all instrumental. And so it kind of relates to Family Man because it's the same sort of thing. But I have to admit, my enjoyment of Family Man is mostly based on the fact that I love the idea of putting out this album that's just going to piss off the punkers. And because to be completely honest, like I love a lot of like music that would be considered punk, but over the my 45 years on this planet, and I would say probably 35 years of being involved with musicians and people in music, a lot of punks are the most fucking annoying people, and they are the most like, it almost feels like they're LARPing all the time.
Yeah.
Like everything about them is fake. Like they have to put on a uniform. They have to have this fake attitude in order to be considered punk, and everything
so
about it.
Conformity.
Which is really weird because punks are the first people to point at other people and call them posers. And I'm like, well, you're the guys in the fucking costumes, and you're the ones like, so many of you not being very true to who you actually are. So anyway, so I love a band like this putting something out in the vein of, like I said, not punk as a sound, but punk as in a mindset of like, why do we need to do an album the way that everybody does an album? Why can't our album be several tracks where the vocalist is just talking, and then we have several tracks on side B that are just instrumentals, and we're fucking around with this weird odd time signature, like let's just fuck around with music in general. And I think that's fucking great. Now, if Black Flag were a band that only put out music like this, I wouldn't give two shits about them. But putting this out in between My War and Slip It In, that fucking rules. It's the same reason, and I know we bring them up all the time, same reason I love Lulu. I think Lulu's a great fucking album, but it's weird as fuck. But I also love the fact that they did this big comeback with Death Magnetic, and then they're like, "Oh yeah, now our next album is going to be a collab with Lou Reed." I mean, that's
you close out with My Apocalypse and immediately greeted with, "I would cut my legs and tits off when I think of Boris Karloff and Kinski."
Yeah. So. Not that I would consider that quote unquote punk. It's just there's a thing that I like.
Small town girl. Sorry.
I just like bands fucking with the idea of what a band is, because if that's the weird thing, is that some people have this idea of like, oh, they're supposed to like, care about their fans and think about their fans. And I'm all like, well, why? Because when everybody came on board to being a fan of that band, they were a fan of what they were doing. Why does it all of a sudden have to switch to where now the band has to do shit in order to please the fans, where previously they did shit and the fans were pleased? So it's like, well, why not just do the things that you want to do? And if the things that you want to do happen to be shit where you're doing the same thing over and over again and you have a good time doing it and everybody's happy, great. Your band's fucking cool. But there's other people that I know deep down inside, they don't want to do the shit all the time, but they feel tied to this idea of like, I have to make a living and I have to like, I want to be cool with these fans that are cool to us. And I realize it's a real slippery slope, and it's one of those, it's a tightrope act, but, but I'm never going to fault anybody either way, because, there's very few examples where I can point at it and say that's a literal sellout. A lot of times it's literally just a band wanting to branch out and wanting to get bigger or whatever they fucking want to do. But so I appreciate those big, bold steps, but I also appreciate big, bold steps where you're walking away from people. Like you're just like, look, here's what you expect. We don't want to do that. And so I love Family Man literally just for that. But if you want to like jump into it, like Armageddon Man's the only one where the whole band plays on it, but it's still pretty weird. Still a pretty weird track. And I'm using the term weird because I'm not very smart. I know I've used the word weird in the past, and people have been like, "That's weird is such a simple way to put things." I'm like, "Well, I'm a simple dude, and that if you want something more complicated, you're at the wrong podcast." But
I think something we need to mention about Armageddon Man as well is that it's almost 10 minutes long, which is unfucking heard of for a punk band, you know?
Yeah. So it's like I said, this is also the beginning of the lineup that I love. And honestly, I think, like I said, in the middle of their discography, this album to me is very enjoyable. I get something really good out of it every time. Whether it's kind of me riffing on how kind of angst-ridden Rollins was at the time and stuff, and I love that. But then Greg Ginn just being this goofy weirdo that just wants to just fuck with the music that he's making and do this whatever it is. I love it. I love hearing it. It's so much fun. So it ends up at number 4. But there's 3 legit killer fucking albums that ended up above it because they're just
so good.
Killer. They're fucking killer. And then my top 3. Do we have the same top 3? No, we don't have the same top 3.
But we have 2.
We may have the same top 2. I don't know. No, we're not going to have the same top 2. Sorry, not to give anything away. But like this top 3 for me, though, it's like, I said that In My Head and Loose Nut were so like close together. These 3 are also like, it was really tough for me to order these because I love, I mean, if you look behind me, those are the only 3 I have on vinyl. I would like all of them on vinyl eventually, but I'll get there. But I've got those 3. But they're my 3 favorites. And so I'm excited to hear where my number 1 lies in your rankings. Let's find out.
Okay, so we're on to the top 3.
After this. I'm kidding. This punk rock ranking has been brought to you by
Pepsi Cola. Okay, so my number 3 is Slip It In.
All right. Okay.
I had to say it. I had to say it like that because that's how. Is it Susie Gardner?
I believe so. From L7.
L7.
I believe that is her. I don't not 100%.
Yeah, Susie Gardner.
So. Okay.
Yeah. I was thinking Judy Gardner. Where have I got that name? Is that from Vixen?
Judy Garland.
Yeah, I'm trying to think because there's like, hang on, I need this answered now. Hang on, one sec, because I always got this mixed up because both are an all-female band, but one's glam and one's grunge.
Is there? Okay, yeah, I don't know.
Was there ever Janet Gardner? There we go. Janet Gardner was the front woman for Vixen.
I've been living on the edge of a broken arm. I don't want to fall. I don't want to go.
We managed to talk about Vixen on a Black Flag podcast, man.
Yeah, I was going to say, tune into the Cranked and Ranked Black Flag ranking where we mentioned Vixen at some point.
Hell yeah. That'll have to happen at some point, too.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so yeah, Slip It In. Featuring Susie Gardner from, on backing vocals on Slip It In for a bunch of horny noises. Anyway, like us. So yeah, Slip It In.
We're gonna need you to come in to do some horny noises. Are you available next Tuesday?
Yeah. But yeah, like great stuff here. Obviously, the title track, Black Coffee, is a classic, awesome song. Wound up. I love the guitar sound on this album. They really fattened it up, didn't they? Like, this for me is where like the production really turns into a zone that I'm like, oh yeah, this is. It still sounds raw, but it sounds well produced as opposed to raw and shittily produced. But yeah, I love the guitar sound on this album. Rat's Eyes is a heavy ass track. Obliteration.
Rat's Eyes. Yeah.
Obliteration. Now, there's moments in this song that make me think of Chuck Schuldiner riffs. There is a certain sinister edge to some of the riffs that make me think, that wouldn't sound out of place on a death album.
Yeah.
The Bars is a riffy punker.
Mm-hmm.
My Ghetto is a fast punker. And You're Not Evil. They definitely really begin to lean into the metal edge a little bit on this album.
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of starts with My War, but in a more Sabbathy way. This way, it gets into a more thrashy, borderline thrashy kind of vibe.
Yeah.
Like I say, this is that. I feel like this is the. You know how we both had. I mean, I don't think it's your third, but you know how we both mentioned in the Metallica ranking that Master of Puppets was our joint third because, like, we believe it's the perfect Metallica album, but it's not our favorite.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how I feel about Slip It In, where it's like, this is fucking incredible. I just happen to like two better than it. But if someone turned around and said that was their favorite, I have nothing to combat that with because it's just fucking incredible.
Yeah. So I feel like our top three is going to be completely different. All three. I think all three are going to be completely different. My number 3 is My War from 1984.
Okay.
And like I said, these are all very close. And if there's certain points on My War where I was immediately like, oh, this is going to be number 1. And then it's like I hear a little bit of Damaged. Oh, this is going to be number 1. And then I hear My War. It's going to be number 1. And then I hear Slip It In. It's going to be number 1. And so it was really rough. But eventually I felt okay with putting My War at 3. I guess if it's somebody's number 1, I agree also. It's the first album of 3 and a live album that they would put out in 1984. And I love the fact that, I mean, obviously it took a couple years because Damaged was 81. This is 84. And they had a lot of legal issues and stuff with the band name and record label bullshit. And so obviously there was a big change, but I just love the fact that in that, few short years, they just decided to throw out the fucking rule book. And it's still got a punk edge to it, to like the first half anyway. But also all of a sudden there are guitar solos that are just fucking off the wall. And then to top it off, the last half of the album is these slow plodding tracks that most people just fucking couldn't wrap their heads around at the time. And which would later lead to sludge metal and grunge and things like that. And, and that's an interesting thing. I always thought it was so fascinating that a lot of the, your Mark Arm, Kurt Cobain, people like that would talk about seeing Black Flag around this time and about the odd thing is they went to this quote unquote punk rock show and were inspired to go listen to Black Sabbath. And so it's like, that's fascinating to me. And I'm pretty sure that all of the members of Black Flag at this point, that wasn't an intention. I don't think they were like, oh, we're going to do Black Sabbath style stuff. It feels like a very natural thing from a group of people, and I'm pointing mostly at Greg Ginn because Greg Ginn plays guitar and bass on this, but it feels like he's a guy that's just not satisfied with whatever's going on around him. And I feel like he's probably the kind of person that is obsessed with a new band every week. And sometimes it's a band that existed 40 years ago, and sometimes it's a band that's out right now, but it doesn't matter. Then you're going to come back to him and say, oh, I finally listened to that band you talked about 2 weeks ago. And he'll be like, who the fuck was that? Yeah. And so I feel like he, especially around this time, he was somebody that was probably taking in so much music and funneling it out through his Greg Ginness. And this is what we get. We start getting what I consider these amazing, like, pushing the boundaries of fucking everything, and I love it. And you got Bill Stevenson on drums, who fucking rules, and just the fact that they just they show up again, and all of a sudden all these punkers are coming out to see them, and not only are they playing these fucking sludgy songs, they all have long hair, and and it's just so, because, and I know that they probably had to deal with those same quote unquote punkers that I was complaining about, where they think everything is supposed to be a fucking uniform. Like, oh, if you're a punk band, you have to dress this way and say these things for the rest of your life. And it's like, if you do that, you're not an actual music fan. You're a fan of a style. And you're, for lack of a better term, you're just doing cosplay. And if you're happy with that, if you're happy with that, great. But and I'm not just gonna put that at punk rock. It happens in other areas of music as well. But
that happens in metal as well.
But that's a big reason why I feel so disconnected with so much music, because like I love a lot of stuff, but I never feel like I'm supposed to all of a sudden be a certain way because of a certain music that I like. Because as soon as I'm really loving a death metal album, there's going to be an alternative rock album that comes out that also moves me in the same way. And there are
I was just going to say, my ride or die metal mentality died the day I discovered grunge, and I was like, actually, this stuff's great too.
Yeah, that's why, like, I've said, especially for me, that I was just this perfect age where people were complaining about Headbangers Ball being ruined because they would play songs like No Rain by Blind Melon. And I was the kid going, I love the fact that they played Blind Melon, and at the end of the night, they played Morbid Angel. Like, that's, to me, that's fucking perfect. So, but anyway, back to My War. I feel like they just weren't, they were driven to do something original. And I love it. My only problem with My War, and a big reason it ends up at number 3, even though I love it, is it feels awkward at times, because sometimes the starts and stops are kind of off, and it feels like, I don't know how it was recorded, because it feels like Bill Stevenson is doing his best to play along with the guitar. And so if the guitar goes off, Bill has to fucking correct. And so songs have this really and not
to fall off the rails.
Not in a proggy way either. It sounds like in a they just didn't have their shit together way, which for sure Bill Stevenson has his shit together. He's an amazing drummer. So that's really it. But at the same time, maybe that's a characteristic that makes the album what it is. And some people would look at that and go, well, that's why I fucking love it. And I that wouldn't be wrong. But so I love that's really the biggest reason. If it was a little bit more, if the production felt more like a band, because I can't divorce myself from thinking, oh, well, Greg Ginn had to go back and do the bass guitar. Did they record the bass and the drums together, the guitar and the drums together? How did it work? But it doesn't feel like a band. It just feels like an album. And I feel like it could have been done better, but it exists in the way that it exists. And I don't think that I would change anything about it. But if I'm having to rank it, it's going at 3 because of those things. But it's a fucking banger of an album. Don't get me wrong. All right, top 2.
Cool. So My War is my number 2.
Holy shit. I'm not surprised about that. I'm surprised about your number 1. Okay. Mm-hmm. All right.
Yeah. So My War, really, as an album, was my introduction to Black Flag properly. Yeah. So first Black Flag album. Sorry, not the Black album. Okay, reset. So obviously My War appears in GTA 5 and was generationally my exposure to it. Hell yeah.
You know what my favorite part of that song is? It's close to the end of the song, where it sounds like skits? It sounds like Rollins has walked away from the mic in the vocal booth and he's just ranting on his own.
Yeah.
He's like, "You want a damn? I can't believe you want a damn!" Like that part. I always imagine at that part that he just has so much aggression. He doesn't know what to do with it, and he's pacing around the room. And he doesn't even know they're still recording him. He's just like, And that part feels so real to me that I'm just like, oh, it's the best part of the whole fucking song. Anyway,
where he goes absolutely skits. I love that. And then Can't Decide is a great song. Beat My Head Against the Wall. You know, the guitars on this feel a bit heavier and sludgier compared to the Damaged. So you know, so that's a big step up for me because, you know, I like my mixes to have a little bit of weight to them because for as classic as Damaged is, it doesn't have a lot of punch in the production. It's more just the raw, visceral kind of thing that it succeeds with. But yeah, I Love You. It's just sardonic and snarky. Forever Time is a punky track. The Swinging Time has a herky jerky feel to it.
The swinging man.
Swinging Man. Sorry, I put time in Forever Time and
Forever Time, Swinging Man.
Yeah, but when you get to side B, this is where shit gets real because it's like, hold on, no, you can't do that, you punk band. No, they're Sabbath now. I'm not allowed to like it. Yeah. So yeah, basically they started doing grunge before grunge was a thing. Isn't this song in particular being played by Black Flag in that Metal Evolution episode of where they're talking about like?
Yeah, I think so.
I've watched the grunge episode so many times. I love that one. And it's funny, you know, Metal Evolution as a series mainly talks about metal. My favorite episode is the grunge episode because it's like, does this belong or doesn't it? And that's what I liked about that. But I'm pretty sure Nothing Left Inside is the song that Black Flag play in that clip.
I think you're probably right.
Three Nights, again, already subverting the punk norms by playing this like funeral dirge, Sabbathy stuff.
Yeah.
And Scream is one last one to close out on. All of these three tracks on side B are over 6 minutes long. So not only is it slow, it's longer, and that's cool. It's got the okay from me. Yeah. I have to wonder at the time, like, what was the ratio of people that liked it to the people that were pissed off by it?
From what I gather, a lot of people didn't. It was mostly people that didn't like it.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Ahead of the curve. Yeah. Seattle liked it.
Yeah, I think the people that did like that were the people that came on board with that album. I think the people who were already fans were the ones that were a little bummed out by it, or a lot bummed out by it. But
never ceases to amaze me how, like, you know, punk's always like pushing boundaries, but always has to stay the same, you know. And that's,
funny, right? Anyway,
that's kind of its Achilles heel.
Speaking of, we'll go on to my number 2, which is Damaged from 1981.
Cool.
First album with Rollins, Hungry Rollins. Anyway, that guy. Who I'm a huge Rollins fan. He is literally, if I was gonna say, you know, my heroes, he would be included in that. Just because I've been following him since the early 90s, not only in his music, but his, you know, spoken word stuff and all of the other things that he's done, acting, whatever. Yeah. But he's a person that, hearing him talk over the years and hearing him grow as a person, because if you've been listening to his spoken word stuff since he's been doing it, you do hear a growth in the kind of person that he is and the way that he looks at things and his humor and all these other things. And he's just always been somebody that, like, I've related to, not only him but also just his way of looking at things. And I've always just him being a person that, like, he never got married, he never had kids. His life is his work. So he's constantly writing a book. He doesn't do music anymore, but he's doing spoken word shows. If he's not doing that, he's putting something else together. He's doing special editions of other bands' stuff he's working on. He does a radio show. I just love the fact that he is one of those people that seems like one of the realest motherfuckers when it comes to who he is. Not trying to impress anybody. Will be the first person to talk shit about himself. But I've always loved that. I've always loved, and if you go back and read some stuff and get in the van and some of his early stuff, it could have gone either way. He could have been a complete douchebag psycho. He had that in him to go that way. But he didn't. He grew from that. And I think a lot of men, most men in their 20s have that psycho douchebag gene in them that could grow. But some of us don't. Some of us keep it at bay. I don't know. But anyway, I've always just, he's the music that he's done. A lot of people could point it and go, well, there are better vocalists than him. And I'm like, sure. And then you could point out like his actual bands. Well, the music they wrote, there's way better music out there. Sure, that's fine. But something feels so honest and real about everything that he's done. And so
for sure.
I've always loved him. And so that's probably why, to me, Black Flag is Greg Ginn and Henry Rollins. Like those two have to be in it for me to really give a damn. Anyway. But on the idea of Damaged, I love these early hardcore albums like this one. I'd also put the first Suicidal Tendencies album in that, where it just feels like such raw, youthful, honest energy and aggression, unfiltered, just like this is how it comes out. And I love that. I enjoy it so much. And to me, this feels like fully formed Black Flag music, where when you listen to the first 4 years, it feels, like I said, like they're workshopping the idea of what Black Flag could be. And eventually they get there, and then they get the final piece of the puzzle, which is Henry Rollins, and boom, Black Flag. So that's what I don't know. That's how I've always viewed it. But Damaged is like an iconic album with an iconic album cover. Yeah. The only one that has Descadena on rhythm guitar. Which is weird because I'm all like, is he actually playing rhythm guitar on this? I know he played it live, but on the album, sometimes I'm like, I only hear one guitar. But I mean, you never know. And I love that in this particular case, sometimes the album feels like it could go off the rails at any time, but it feels like its momentum is going to keep it going no matter what. And I really enjoy that aspect of the album. But yeah, I just think that this is an album that so many bands since have tried to recreate in some sort of way, and most of the time they absolutely fail, for one reason or another. But when it comes to just like straightforward hardcore music, I really think that like Damaged is the album. Like I really just put it up there and be like, if I was wanting to make that music, and if that music was the music that meant the most to me, I would probably Damage would probably be my favorite album of all time. But different people have different views of what hardcore is, what punk is, whatever. But I don't think anyone would argue that Damaged is a fucking absolute classic, and probably one of the most important rock quote unquote albums ever made. So, and that's only my number 2.
Cool. So I guess that brings me to my number 1.
Which I love this. I love this.
Yep. And, keeping in, it's almost like Black Flag was the perfect band to be, it's almost designed for people to have hot takes on. And my particular hot take is that my favorite Black Flag album has become Loose Nut.
It's so great. We didn't match up on anything this episode, but it's,
really,
yeah.
Wow.
No.
Apart from what the.
Oh, but yeah. Well, that doesn't count. Well, fuck that.
Yeah.
I've already discarded that album, and I'm never going to think about it ever again. Now that we've done this.
Well, where do I start? Loose Nut. First things first. Here's a mega big part of why Loose Nut is my favorite. I love the production on it. It feels like that metallic grunge of the late 80s and early 90s with a little bit of thrash thrown in. It gives me early Soundgarden, early Green River, the pre Pearl Jam band, the early Alice in Chains. It's all got a little bit of that on this. 5 years before people really think of what it would become. So Loose Nut, love that reverb heavy production and the heavily distorted guitars. I think of production wise, this is probably the most metal Black Flag sounding album.
Yeah, I would agree.
I've heard thrash albums that sound like this, Bastard in Love is a snarky track. Annihilate This Week is fucking crushing, incredible song, heavy as balls. Best one yet. This won't be the best one yet. Modern Man, heavy ass song. This is good. Damn right it is. Love the weird feeling. I'm the One, not to be confused with Van Halen, but it is an up-tempo rocker.
Or I'm the One by Descendants, which that's more closely related.
Oh man, there's just so much good stuff on this album. I absolutely love it. Sinking, the bass line in this is so cool. Now She's Black, one last metal edge punker to close out the record. Honestly, the moment this album started, I was like, this is the one. This is gonna be the one, isn't it? Like, because I'd never heard Loose Nut until we started doing this, and like as I was listening through the albums, Damaged, awesome. My War, awesome. Family Man's really cool. Slip It In, and then I come across Loose Nut, the first 4 notes, and I'm already like, oh, they've given me this now. Hell yeah. So yeah, this to me, considering it's 1985, is the logical heavy metal conclusion of their trajectory. In my head being, okay, we've done the metal thing now. Let's get really fucking weird. But Loose Nut for me is the peak of that kind of evolution that they would like kind of undertake. And honestly, I know it may be a hot take, but honestly, from my own personal point of view and experience listening to these albums, it wound up being my favorite. And I think it deserves more love than it gets.
I'm totally behind your number one, just because it's my favorite lineup of Black Flag, but also it's probably the most collaborative that lineup was on an album. So it's a great number one. I also love that album, but yeah, that one's. But my number one had to go to Slip It In from 1984. Nice. And I think it's hard to explain with Slip It In because it's the third album they put out in 1984, their fourth album total. And I feel like they had some time. One, they actually got the lineup that I love together. So they're a full band, fully formed band. But I feel like they've had the year to put out a banger of an album where they experimented a little bit, and then a really experimental kind of thing, and then they've been touring their fucking asses off. I think like around this time they were playing like 150 shows a year or some shit like that. Like it was crazy amounts of shows. But and then they it's almost like the culmination of all of that was Slip It In, where it's just, to me, so well done, and just a tighter, better sounding, almost like everything from My War kind of just improved. And I love My War. I really think that with slipping in, like I think with a lot of our rankings, I always try to look at things like if I was going to point somebody to a Black Flag album to start with, clearly I don't want to go with anything really early because they ended up doing weird shit. So I'm all like, well, what's the album that I feel is kind of in the middle of all that, where it's punky, there's enough punkiness, but there is enough in there for you to go, hold on, there's something odd about this band. And you can be like, why, yes. They did do some odd things. And I feel like this is just the most focused kind of presentation of all of those worlds, where it can live in the punk and hardcore world, and it can live in the world that inspired grunge and thrash bands or whoever the fuck it is that it inspired later on. So, yeah, I really think that when it comes to the best representation of what Black Flag were capable of at their peak, I think Slip It In is that album, and it's got so many fucking bangers on it. And yeah, I don't have a lot more to say about it, because I really do think that, especially my top three, like those first three, I mean, I'll even throw Family Man in there as well. But so those first 4 full lengths that they put out, I really just, they're so good as a discography that I'm just like, fuck, I don't know where to put it. And I would, I'll include Loose Nut in there as well, because you get to In My Head, and it does sometimes feel like it was meant to be more of a Greg Ginn thing than a band thing. But just that, I love that kind of discography from a band, where they start somewhere and they really it's almost like made for this kind of thing, for a podcast where 2 dudes just sort of take into account what a band actually accomplished over a period of years. And in this case, it was only a period of just a fucking few years, really. But yeah, yeah, Slip It In's my number 1. Love it.
Cool.
Love it. So yeah.
You want to do the thing? we doing it?
Let's do it as we normally do when we finish a discography. We celebrate by doing this. 3, 2, 1. Yeah! We did it! We did it. Damn! I love how you went for My War, I went for Family Man. All right. All right, bye everyone. No, that's been fun. There are certain bands that we eventually get to, and I'm just like, I know this is going to be fun, and it was fun.
Yeah,
which was very nice for me, because I really didn't have a lot of fun with Dream Theater. The funnest part of Dream Theater was just talking about it with you. Everything else about it, I was just like, oh, god damn it. But
you liked Awake though, which I liked.
I did, yeah. I mean, there are things here and there that I did like. So that's, I think that's probably what made it worse, was there were things that I did like, and it was kept getting sabotaged by other shit. But anyway, whatever. That's totally, go back and listen to our 2-parter of Dream Theater. If for some reason you're a person that wants to hear about Black Flag and then Dream Theater, we got you covered, ladies and gentlemen. So
that's like our approach to, that's the whole Black Flag thing. It's like, we'll give you prog metal and then immediately follow it up with hardcore punk. And that's basically how we schedule our episodes, is never do the same kind of thing unless it's like a 2-parter. But
yeah. And I'm pretty sure the next actual artist we do is totally different than both of those. So
I have a little stipulation with that that I wanted to field your way first before we do that one, because
we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it off of the episode. You guys can't be privy to all of our meetings.
Yeah. I mean, a behind the scenes video isn't off the cards, but you aren't getting any set lists or anything.
Nah, but we can tell you that the next episode that you will see from us, we will be doing another year. our top 10 of a particular year. So so that'll be fun. But then after that, we jump on doing another discography of somebody, and everyone will have a great time. I want to thank, as usual, all the peanut butter platypuses. That's all the people that last through an entire episode. That's fine. Also, if you're one of those people that doesn't care what we're talking about, you're just here because of us. I love that. It's weird for me to wrap my head around that, because like sometimes people are like, I just love hearing you guys talk. I'm like, oh really? Because sometimes I annoy myself. But I mean, it's great because it's like, why are we doing this? You know, who the fuck cares? Apparently people do, and they're the peanut butter platypuses. Thank you very much. You guys are fucking cool. So yeah, no need to hang around anymore. We can make this, you know, we can wrap this up like a Black Flag album in just 30 minutes. It's been way more than 30 minutes. But anyway, in one episode, we packed it in. All right, that's it. I'm going to get the fuck out of here. And as usual, I'm going to throw it over to my good buddy, Eddie Sparxx, to take us out.
Later, dude! You're one of them! You say the episode's end, but you're one of them! Them! Later, dude!
You gotta keep doing that.
Them! Later, dude! Later, dude! I can't believe it! Later, dude! Later, dude! Later!
I thought we were going to end it like My War, where you just go, later, dude! And that's the end of it.
The good one.
Just pretend that we did that and it was better. All right.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.